Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends. Here we are at Kardec Radio and the Spiritist Society of Virginia. We are here to talk about raising peaceful children. And Daisy and Paloma are here with us, right? While Carol Correa and Luciana are in the other channel of Kardec Radio's YouTube, as well as the Spiritist Society of Virginia's channel on Facebook, to talk about humility as one of Ben Franklin's virtues. So if you have children, connect there. And you stay here, we stay here, right? I see friends joining us. And let us welcome everyone as we are talking about the PC now. Some people are like, oh, but I don't have children. Should I watch this? Of course. Mm-hmm. This is for all of us, not only in this life, but lives to come, because one day we're going to reincarnate. Oh, you bet we will. We're going to reincarnate. And if we know the plan, we're going to expedite the progress of our lives. So let us then today begin with our message. Paloma is going to read for us an initial message.
We're going to read a message from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life, psychographed by Chico, by the Spirit Emmanuel, chapter 51, Spiritual Infants. Anyone who is still nourished on milk is not experienced in the word of righteousness because he is still an infant. Paul to the Hebrews 5:13. Out of respect for those who are with us in the struggle, those who are part of our daily endeavors, we should avoid conflicts when failures and weaknesses unexpectedly appear. Before making any judgment, we should know the sum of the spiritual qualities involved. We should never forget to show understanding regarding those who wander off the upright path. The road traveled by an experienced person is strewn with infants of such nature. God surrounds the steps of the learned person with those who are unlearned, so that their darkness may receive light, and so that this same light may be glorified. In this substantially divine interaction, the unlearned person learns, and the learned one progresses. Disciples of goodwill need a sincere attitude of observation and tolerance. It is natural for them to enjoy the rich and substantial food that has been given them to nourish their souls. However, they should not belittle other brothers and sisters whose spiritual organism can only tolerate the simple milk of fundamental knowledge. Every infant is fragile, and no one would ever criticize it for being so. If your mind is free to take flight, do not forget those who are still in the nest where you yourself were born and where you stayed for a long time growing your feathers. The infinite lies stretched out before your wandering eyes. The others will join you someday, but just because they have not yet done so, do not forsake them, nor refuse them the milk that they love and still need.
Right. So let us pray that we may connect with the good spirits and receive what we need. Let us then visualize ourselves embraced in a welcoming greeting by the loving spirit mentors of the Spiritist Society of Virginia and Kardec Radio. They have an extra amount of volunteers in the spiritual realm that are able to visit our homes as an extension of the meeting of our Spirit Center. Let us feel their presence as they remind us of the order of events. Dear Master Jesus, you are more than our master, you are the governor of our planet. We know that the title, is not the essence of it all, but the meaning of it, your fulfillment of God's will, guiding us to progressive directions. Our old conditionings have been deterring us of new achievements. And we need renewal. In the therapeutic educational meeting of tonight, may we find new insights, new tools to counter-condition ourselves and march more firmly towards you. You've been awaiting us for more than 2,000 years. And we are weary, tired of suffering, and we are truly willing to fulfill God's will inside of us, dreaming of the day in which we are more virtuous as well as the world. When love presides and goodness is all there is. May this moment be a representation of what lies ahead of us. Glorious days of kindness, of determination, courage, hope, and much love. May then we stay under your guidance, feeling your protection as you grant us the permission to gather together in your name, in love, and so be it. Wow. Chopin didn't know we were going to use his music to say a prayer, but if you read the book Memoirs of a Suicide, right, we're going to see that he got it, that he has a higher purpose. So by now he knows that his music is good foundation for us for opening our hearts to God. Today, Daisy, Paloma, and I are going to share with you some excerpts, because this is a study session for us, some excerpts of the Spiritist teachings on how to raise peaceful children. We have a lot to say. But before we begin, let us hear a beautiful question and answer from the Spirit's book. It's the Spirit's book moment, right, Paloma?
That's right. We've been studying now for several weeks the Spirit's book together. And the question for us, I would say it's short, but not sweet, because the spirits really bring to us a lot of awareness. And sometimes we don't like hearing. So it's like, wake up, guys. So let us see what question 902 says. Is it wrong to desire wealth with a desire to do the good? So Kardec was saying, what if, we're looking to really accumulate wealth with the ideal of doing the good? What do you think the spirit says? Okay, I'll tell you, because I also was very curious when I opened the message, and it says, such a sentiment is of course laudable if it's pure. So if it was pure, they would be like, okay, it makes sense. But then they ask questions back to Kardec, meaning questions back to us. So they asked, but is such a desire always disinterested enough? Does it hide a personal ulterior motive? Isn't the first person to whom we wish to do good many times our own self? So they said, yeah, Kardec, if it is truly, truly, truly pure, okay, we agree with your question, yes. However, that is not the reality. The reality is that we always give expecting to receive. We say we're going to do something, and really, really, we were not planning on doing all the good we said we were going to do with the money, which is a little part of it. And most of the time, we look for our own selves to benefit. So I don't think the spirits can be clearer than that. I'll leave you with the reflection and the reflection for all of us in answering these questions. Are we accumulating, or what are we accumulating, and why are we accumulating?
Wow. So much food for thought. And it adds to what we are going to bring tonight about what we're doing. Many people, when they say we're going to have children, some people have children and it wasn't planned. But when we plan it out, and what do we do with it? And there are many reasons why people have children. And we're not talking about not having children, but what to do with it, with this new moment in our lives. Is it about just raising somebody to have titles, to compete, form a family, and be in the world? What is the purpose of it all? Well, let's ask the governance of the planet, because the governance of our planet has a goal. When we raise children, we are raising children as children of God. So inevitably, when we have children, the ultimate goal is to raise them as peaceful children. Why? Jesus told us, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. So to be children of God and to see in everyone children of God is a peacemaking effort. It's an equalizer. And that is the goal for all of us. If you go to the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 14, item 9, St. Augustine has a whole thesis to tell us that parents have a mission that is the most important mission, raising a child of God. And the goal of parenting is solely to connect that child to God. That doesn't mean we're not going to send them to school, that we're still going to do the material things, giving them the tools to be in this life. But the goal is to connect that child to God. But aren't we all connected to God? Yes. God is connected to us. But are we consciously connected to God? And we're living at a very strange time when the younger generations are devoid, majority of them, devoid of this knowledge of God. The new generations are becoming less religious. They have no spiritual religious reference. Parents less and less are bringing their children or giving them spiritual religious education. To the point that nowadays you send your children to school, they spend 8 hours there and they don't hear a word about God. How do you go by your day navigating the world without that reference? No wonder we're living this chaos, this disaster. No wonder we are at a moment in which there are people who lack a sense of ethics, of morality, and they are in one of the highest positions of leadership in the world. That's the level of our lack of God. No reference superior to us. How do you live in good relationships without God? Without the equalizer element, peace. If we go to a book like this book, The Family Virtues Guide, just to see that this is not something that is restricted to Spiritism, Linda Popov, in the book, The Family Virtues Guide, says that amongst other things, peacefulness comes from an awareness that all human beings are part of one family. So if I am there in my house and I think that I am from God, but my neighbor is not, that we're different, that we have backgrounds that bring us apart, how can we be peaceful? How can we work with peace with someone if we feel that we have no commonalities to the point that we feel one, like a family? How can we avoid world wars if we feel estranged amongst ourselves? No wonder we're tiptoeing every day wherever we go. No wonder many people are undergoing a lot of anxiety, stress, depression, panic attacks, schizophrenia, or many other mental disorders, because we don't feel it's safe. We feel threatened, and we even feel the need to attack, sometimes even to defend ourselves. Where do we change it all? It must begin in the family. It must begin with the way we parent our children. We must change the way we parent our children. If we parent our children out of fear, like many parents, teaching them to attack,
Mhm.
they are attacked. If we teach them to defend themselves and to stay away and not be compassionate, not be kind, not be all encompassing, how are we going to create a peaceful society? Impossible. How are we going to encourage them to endure the hardships of life when we teach them to survive under fear, anger, sadness, telling them if somebody hits you, hit them back. You have to defend yourself. You have to protect your things. Like I've heard when our daughter Virginia was at kindergarten. They were allowed to bring toys into the school, and this girl wanted one of the dolls that Virginia brought in. I was picking her up right at the moment when the other girl was furious because Virginia's saying, I have to go, my mom is calling me. And the girl wanted to keep it. And Virginia somewhat allowed. And then a teacher said, you have to teach your child to be more combative and to defend her things. What am I going to say to that teacher? That we're going to fight with somebody because of a doll? That's not peaceful. What do? We're going to raise our children, making them believe that the world is a battlefield in which to survive. You have to kick and scream. You have to tiptoe because it's not safe. Some parents during the pandemic, they don't want to talk about the virus, which is the opposite. Oh, I don't want to scare my children. No. That's not about scaring the children. It's about being real. They have to be prepared. A virus is just a creature of God. Of course it is. Read the book Evolution into Worlds. We're not saying God created the virus, but we co-created this one that is decimating thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives around the world. But we need to share, yes, there is a virus. But let us pray. Let us understand that we can dodge around it. God is taking care of us. We're not scaring our children. Two extremes in one based on fear, and the other still based on fear. Sometimes it's anger. How are we going to become peaceful? If we see the history of childhood, we're going to see that it's a very new thing on the earth that we treat children with a different view. If we go a few centuries back, we're going to see that people saw children as beings that needed to be occupied because they had to be saved in their souls through work. People believed because they were messy, they were loud, that they had some evil things inside of them. And it's very new to us, this new sense of how precious childhood is and the new understanding of childhood. We could here tell you the history of educational psychology, of child development, but we can tell you one thing. It's a new thing on earth of less than 100 years that we start understanding a little bit more about the psychology of childhood. There are parts of the world that still don't understand what we in the Western society or countries like in North America, we understand. That in childhood, as science says, it's such a critical moment in our development. We have such a plastic brain nervous system that we need a special care for those number of years that we're developing. Science agrees that the first 7 years of life are so critical that they may change us for the rest of our lives, at least having long-term effects in our physiology, in our psychology, in our relationships for the rest of our lives, in our mental health as a whole. We also see, in terms of emotions, that the first 3 years of life are the most critical. Counting the prenatal life and the first 3 years, because by the third year of our lives, our brain is at 80% of the size of an adult brain. Our emotional acquisitions, the patterns, are acquired in the first 3 years of life. Telling us about how humanity is far from actually educating well our children. Because we know parents who don't even talk to their babies because they claim that babies can't understand them. And we refrain from talking to the baby, whereas in Spiritism, the point of view is completely different. But little by little, sciences like neuroscience show to us that the brain, the nervous system as a whole, responds to stimuli. If we stimulate, there will be a response. There will be a certain growth, which is not about the number of cells, but particularly special connections that are made. When we're born with full potential. And then instead of just growing connections, actually, in the first years of life, we're going to see the pruning of certain synapses in our brain, showing to us that if we don't get stimulated in certain areas, our brains, our physical body is going to save energy by not sustaining connections that are not used and putting more effort into those that are used, creating new, stronger synapses, creating new pathways to sustain certain behaviors, emotions, and the ways of being. So it tells us that we need a whole lot of training to be good parents. Now let's bring in the Spiritist view, which adds so much more and goes hand in hand with science, but always more advanced than science, because Spiritism has the vanguard of the thought of humanity on earth. In science, we understand that whatever happens in the first months and years of life will rewire our brain for the longest time. In our connections with father, mother, relatives, it will rewire our physiology, our emotions, and promote the sustainability of such behaviors. Spiritism, since Kardec's time in 1857, when he got in question and answer 383 the knowledge from the wise spirits, saying a spirit is more impressionable during childhood, when the impressions it receives more easily mold its personality, and therefore its progress. So, as many previous educators and philosophers, many thought that you are what you need to become to adapt in life. But others, like Pestalozzi and his predecessors, precursors, show to us that whatever we teach these children, they will become. We are plastic. We have a physical system that is ready to receive stimuli and ready to develop it. But we are not paying much attention to it. When parents say, I don't teach anything about God to my children, I'll let them grow and make a choice, too late. Because it is when they are young that they do it. For example, when they are in the belly, at prenatal life, you already talk to that spirit that is incarnating, materializing little by little about God. Even if they know, you're just reinforcing, bringing back to knowledge. Like we say to our daughter, you already know this. We're just reminding you. But some spirits don't know. Many spirits on earth have never been exposed to true notions, conscious ideas, knowledge about God. So they need the heavy duty of it all and the constant stimuli saying, we are children of God. We're here because God wants us to do. When we wake up, say good morning. Let's thank God for this new day. Always, every day. But Vanessa, it's brainwash. No, brainwash is something that is not good. This is called coaching. Brainwash is something that derails into bad behavior. We're talking about coaching for the good. And coaching is like a coach. You practice and you practice it yourself and the child comes with you. We're eating, thank you God for we're eating at every meal. We're driving, God, please protect us in this drive. And people think, oh, this is a fanaticism. No, it's not fanaticism. It's called awareness. Jesus was constantly referring to God at every moment. Everything is God-centered. One day, like planet Jupiter, that is much more evolved than us, and you can go to the Spiritist magazine and read the whole issue that has Mozart on the cover. He says, people in Jupiter, everything they do, it's a song of praise to God, even nature. That's our destination, to achieve that level, in which everything we do is praise to God. It's praiseworthy of God. So we appreciate not only what God did, but we partake into the work, enjoying being useful to God, which is the idea of work. And by constantly referring to it, naturally, that child will be trained, will be coached, will blossom in the divine essence that is already in there. But we would like to bring an idea here, because we're living at a time that is very special, the transition. Earth is in a particular transition, a transition that deserves special attention and it deserves special measures. Because right now, We are at exam time on earth. What does that mean? We're going to be tested in things we have been learning all along, like we are at the pandemic. Are we faithful to God? This is time to practice faith. Feeling that God is taking care of us on earth, even if our government doesn't know anything, God knows. And we trust in God. And we trust in our divine ability to navigate the current times with ease, with calmness, with serenity, becoming more virtuous. This is the time in which we're going to be undergoing expiations that are unprecedented. We're seeing a high level, like cancer, like we've never seen before, because it's the expunging of those vibratory maladjustments that need to be expelled from our spiritual body. We're going to see natural disasters happening all the time, like the wildfires in California. We are at a time in which we're being called to reconcile with our enemies by giving them a new meaning. Because the generations that are coming along, they are here to fulfill the promise of the new world, our world of regeneration. This is the book that we wrote with Divaldo Franco that talks about the new generation based on Kardec's explanations in the book Genesis chapter 18, item 28, when Kardec talks about the characteristics of this new generation. It has been coming for more than 100 years. Kardec talked about it, and it has been coming and coming and coming, and maybe you're already part of it, very likely. Not only those who are being born today, but in greater and greater numbers, we're coming to the earth with a new proposal, and this was written in 1868. Those who are born with precocious intelligence and reasoning powers, joined to the innate sentiment of goodness and spiritualist beliefs, which is the unmistakable sign of a certain degree of interior advancement. So you recognize, and maybe you were one of those kids when you were little, and you can see that more and more of these children are coming along, those who are fast at thinking, but they also have good feelings. Those who push and hit, and no, we're not talking about those, because some of those are very smart, very intelligent, but they don't have this innate sentiments of goodness and the belief in God. So here's a warning for all parents. If you have a child that doesn't appreciate talking about God and Jesus, etc., pay close attention to this child. Because this child, more than any other, needs more of God. More attention, more love, more discipline, more openness of the heart to God. Because we are destined to do this, to advance at a level in which we love God. We love to think about the general good, and we reason it. Kardec says more. This generation will not be composed exclusively of eminently superior spirits, but of those who, having progressed already, are predisposed to embrace all the progressive ideas and are apt to second the regenerative movement. Why is this important? Because Kardec is saying to us that this new generation that has been coming along and continues coming in greater numbers, not necessarily they are super evolved to the level that they are like angels. No, they already have the signs of their intelligence, the precocious intelligence, but they are willing to do the good. They are willing to make efforts. They are easy to the new call of our society. It's clear that our planet Earth is gravitating to a new phase. In spite of some leadership here and there that still portrays the inferior forces of the earth, many, 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 many leaders in this world are already united to push our planet to another level of friendship, of kindness, of collaboration, mutual collaboration, and the progressive ideas. Progressive ideas doesn't mean chaos, doesn't mean liberalism. It means the general good. So how will this earth be a better place? As Kardec says in that very chapter, when the regeneration of humanity will have the renewal of the spirits. So it doesn't require that everyone becomes like that, but at least majority of us will be predisposed to the ethical moral principles. So we are living at a time in which, as Mentor Joseph has been saying, we need to be bold to fight for what is right for everyone. We need to be bold in embracing God as the center of our universe without imposing onto others, but inviting, sharing. We need to be bold, courageous in sharing the good through our social media. We need to be bold to create a new way of raising our children, one that hasn't been done by many people. It's about boosting that peaceful essence that we all have, because deep inside of us, we're children of God, and all we need to do is to bring that about. And if we cultivate it, we're going to be able to cultivate it in others, to raise our children in such a way that we're going to work with them first and foremost at the level of emotional awareness. There are people who are parents and they don't cultivate any form of peace, quietude, kindness, but they want their children to be peaceful, to be kind. It doesn't match. So we would say the first step is to be aware of we parents. Where are we? Before we demand anything from our children or coach them to anything, we need to coach ourselves. Where are we? So that's why we're recommending this book as a good coaching of good emotions, good feelings, good virtues, the Family Virtues Guide that goes hand in hand with the Gospel According to Spiritism, the Spirit's Book, and many other books in Spiritism that talks about how we enter this field of peace within so we can bring our children to being peacemakers. As Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Question to us, you and I. Are you a peacemaker? We need some silence to think. Am I a peacemaker? Don't think about others. Think of yourself. Let me think about myself. Let us then ask Paloma to help us understand more deeply about what Jesus meant about being a peacemaker and how a peacemaker can be called one day this child of God. Right, Paloma?
That's right. We are going to explore from Jesus' teachings what does it mean to be a meek and peace-loving. So according to the gospel, according to Spiritism, and if you start on chapter 5, you're going to find all the Beatitudes. Today we're dedicating this study for chapter 9. And I can only imagine that when Jesus came with these teachings at a time that aggressiveness was really present. I mean, imagine repression. A government that was, the Romans were coming in and really imposing. Children had no say. That is for sure. Mothers, much less. They were probably right there with children. And here comes Jesus with a proposal of meekness and peace. Let us go a little bit deeper. And he said, blessed are the meek, for they shall possess the earth. We all know the sayings because we've heard it many times, but what does it mean to be meek? And how do we exercise meekness? That is the most important thing for us to reflect today so that we can apply in ourselves, but also, as we were saying, apply to our children. We need techniques to get our children to exercise something that is quite contrary to our society at this time. It won't be, but right now it depends on us to exercise and on ourselves and help our children develop these virtues. So to be meek is when it's very contrary to our thoughts, but it's when we are humble, we are calm. Think of Chico Xavier for us, a little bit closer to our time, very meek, very, to himself, but that doesn't mean weak. Meek is not weak. Meek is actually so strong that we are able to be humble and stay quiet, peaceful, no imposition. And Jesus says, they shall possess the earth. Why? And very interesting that Vanessa was talking about the planetary progress, because that is why. So let us start from the basics. We are all children of God. You, me, our children, the criminals in jail, our neighbors, doesn't matter. You can think of the worst person in the world, and we are all children of God. And because we are all children of God, we are all under the same divine laws. One very important to us, the law of love and charity. And under the law of love and charity, we are supposed to love everybody. Because if we feel that we're children of God and there's no difference between you and me, then we love each other without any boundaries, like God loves us. Do we understand that love yet? Not yet. But we are hearing about it. The good spirits tell us, Jesus demonstrated to us, it's getting closer. But we're yet to understand what is love without any boundaries. So let us go a step further. If we are under the law of love and charity, how do we exercise it? We exercise by being meek and peace-loving. Let us pause here before we go forward. Let us think of the opposite. We're trying to exercise the law of love. And we are in our homes with our children. And we're being basically dictators. Do this, do that. But are we truly exercising love and charity? And if we don't, are we being meek and peace-loving? No. Meek and peace-loving virtues won't happen if we don't try to exercise the law of love and charity. And if we don't exercise the law of love and charity, that means we're yet to understand that we are all children of God. You see, it's all connected. And once we know all these steps, where do we go? We go towards this planetary progress. We are looking for the future. So we want to be in Jupiter too, right? We're looking towards there. And they're giving us the pathway towards a happy planet. We're in it right now. We are in the transition. It's a matter of us rolling up our sleeves. Are we going to put our hands to work and develop the skills in the generation that depends on us? There's a reason why Jesus said those things. It's not by mistake that he was teaching us these items. Let us continue. Blessed are the peace-loving, for they shall be called children of God. So we are all children of God. Eventually, we are all going to be peace-loving. We're going to get there. Do you feel it? How do we get there? The good spirits tell us, because they're not just talk, talk, talk. They give us very concrete steps. They say, one of the virtues we work, or two, affability and meekness. What does that mean? They go further. Benevolence towards all. But they say true benevolence. The ones that is just not the ones you're wearing the external masks. It's the benevolence that you don't expect anything for. True benevolence. And then what? We have to apply the virtue at home within the family setting. Because they explain to us that a lot of times, because we wear these masks and we are pretending something on the external, at home, we're really showing our true selves. And then there's no benevolence there. So it's not only exercising affability and meekness on the exterior. It is truly from within, and it will be applied on the outside. And he continues. They tell us, it is not enough for lips to flow with milk and honey. Because if the heart does not do the same, it is hypocrisy. It is hypocrisy. It's not maybe, it's an affirmation. Those who affability and meekness are not feigned never belie themselves. They are the same both in the world and at home, meaning no masks. They are true to the beliefs. They are aligned with it. Furthermore, it is said that even if we're able to fool others by appearances, we do not fool God. So it brings to us a lot of awareness here to say, one, we have to practice the virtue. We're not there yet. Otherwise, we wouldn't be learning this. If we're getting to learn this together, it's because all of us need to exercise these virtues and exercise to your true self. So we need to understand where we stand as a person, as a family, as parents, as we're dedicating today to children. We need to understand as parents, where do we stand so that we can work to where we want to be. Because if you don't know where you want to go and where you are, how are you going to have any plan? It's like a teacher without a planning session. It's a nightmare. You know, kids are everywhere. And the understanding that if we are lying, we're only lying to ourselves, because God knows. He's not going to punish us. He is loving and caring and supportive. He's here for us, sending these messages. But he knows. So we might as well stop, the pretensions. Let us keep going. Another virtue, patience. And it says, pain is a God-sent blessing to the elected ones. Interesting. Do we feel less pain because of this? No. Pain is pain, and only the person that's going through it is feeling it. And we have an enormous compassion. That said, on the gospel according to Spiritism, the good spirit says it's God sent to the elected ones. The ones that are able to sustain the pain that they are suffering. And patience is a form of charity. Why is it a form of charity? Because sometimes us staying put and letting it go is a way to do good. Let us think right now, in the pandemic, where people are really feeling it, and attuning themselves to vibrations of anxiety, which is the very opposite of the patience. They are feeling they're out of control and they're losing the patience, and it's spiraling out of control, affecting our children because they're also mirroring our behavior. So when we say, okay, I'm going to stay home put, and I am going to pray for patience, that's charity. It's charity right now to stay home and don't go spread, viruses to people that might be really hurting for it. Patience. And the forgiveness of others. We need to exercise forgiveness because who are we that we haven't committed a mistake in the past? We need to have patience and exercise forgiveness so that we can also be forgiven. This is all goes together. And also because we're going to want our children to forgive us too. We exercise forgiveness, they see, and they're going to be like, I understand that my parents weren't perfect, because none of us are. The expectation of perfect parents, not yet. But I've tried my best. And because of that, my children will forgive my shortcomings. Patience. Jesus was patient. Jesus knew what was going to happen. And he was having the Last Supper with the disciples. Patient. He wasn't like, oh my God, I know what's going to happen. And, everybody do this, do that. No. the last teachings, as everybody as children of God, he was caring and loving, demonstrating to us that everything has its time. So what do the spirits tell us? They said, courage, my friends. Christ is your model. He suffered more than any of you and had nothing for which to reproach himself. Whereas you have your past to expiate and to strengthen you for the future. So be patient. Be Christian. This word sums up everything. So if you exercise patience, you are being Christian. Have we thought about that? It's mind-blowing, the connection. That when you are, and it's not about Christian as a religion, let us remember that. It's about the Christ consciousness. When you are patient, you are aligning yourself to Jesus Christ consciousness. Beautiful. There's more. Oh, the words that are hard for us. Obedience. Have we heard of somebody meek that is a rebel? No, that's the opposite. That is definitely not meek. You know, and they're saying, okay, other virtues for us to work, obedience. And obedience, according to the spirits, requires us to have courage. Very different from our society that thinks when you are obedient, you're just accepting things and you are weak and you don't speak up and you're not loud enough. But the good spirits are saying, no, for you to be obedient, of course, obedient according to the law of God. Let us not be obedient to things that make no sense. We have to use our reason. But obedient according to the law of God requires courage. Because when somebody comes to you and say, the law of the man allows you to carry a gun, and you're going to have the courage to say, I'm sorry. No, it doesn't, according to God. We need to be bold to make changes. And then the next big word for us, resignation. When we feel in our heart that God is in charge. I am not in charge. And with that, I'm practicing humility, selflessness, because my ego is not the one in charge anymore. God is. And we have to teach our children, because we see the phases that they grow and they definitely go through the my. It's my toy, my pen, my book. Sometimes something so small, it's my. We all went through it. Did we stay on the my, or have we grown out of it? And when our children are 3, going through the my phase, are we telling them, no, hold on, that is not yours, that is God's? We need to coach them to think about, is that really yours? God gave it to you. It's not like, oh, it's a phase. It might not be a phase. Hopefully it's just a phase because we've worked with it. But what if it's not? And we didn't do our jobs as parents. And the Spirit says, blessed are they who are meek, for they will lend a willing ear to our teachings. Meaning, when we are meek and we're exercising humility and selflessness, this allows us to listen to the teachings. Because if we're going through this right now and we're saying, you know what? No, that is not how it's going to go. Then these teachings will be very hard to be absorbed. We need to let our ego go and receive the message and do our analysis. Otherwise, it's pointless. Pointless. And then the study on the gospel in that chapter ends with this big word. And why do they bring anger? They were talking about virtues. And they finish with anger. And why is that? Anger is a big deal for us. I guess it's been a big deal since when Jesus brought the teachings, when Kardec was compiling the information, when the spirits were coming and saying, we have to talk about anger. Why do we feel anger? Why do we react? And they say, wounded pride. Wounded pride. We feel like we were attacked personally, and our reaction is to feel a lot of anger. And not only that, we think it's normal. We see children trying to deal with those emotions. They don't know what to do with anger. Then they get it. And sometimes you see them, trying to punch things and kicking things. What do we do with that anger? We name it. Okay, I understand you're feeling anger. But let us now breathe in, breathe out, calm them down, and tell them it is not okay. I understand you're feeling it, but that doesn't mean you're going to go hit something or someone or break something. And it's not a phase. People can tell you, oh my goodness, boys are like that. We hear a lot. Boys are like that. It will go away. But then we see teenagers that are committing crimes that are unspeakable of. And we ask, why is it happening? Something is off. Did we teach them how to deal with anger? And did we teach them the other virtues? Did we teach them patience? Did we teach them to be loving? I mean, we have to love them so they know what it is to be loved and to practice loving. So when the Spirit brings us anger, it's because we need to recognize in ourselves that we still feel that emotion very close to us. It impacts our health because it reacts on our health. If you start accumulating anger, you will have physical symptoms. You can bet on it. But do you think the spirits leave us like that? No. They bring us a message. They do. To finish up, they said, in sum, anger does not exclude certain qualities of the heart, but it keeps one from practicing much good and can lead to practicing much evil. This fact should be enough to motivate efforts to control it. Moreover, spiritists are encouraged for another reason. Anger is contrary to charity and Christian humility. So let us not feel this pull towards anger. And if we do, let us be humble, resignation that God is in charge, and let the anger go. And we're going to see now a beautiful example of someone that grew up under the Christian conscious guidelines, and he let go of anger or never felt it. Because if he did, we wouldn't be where we are today.
That's right, Paloma. So we have such a beautiful example to share tonight as we are talking about raising peaceful children. And it's an account by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier in this beautiful, beautiful book, Paul and Stephen. If you haven't read this book, if you haven't studied it, or even if you have read it, it's one of those must-have to keep on your nightstand and go back to it, because the teachings contain the stories is truly it's unforgettable. And there's no way to talk about being meek and peaceful without referring back to Paul and Stephen. But tonight we're gonna focus specifically on Stephen. And as Emmanuel describes in the preface of this book, that we wouldn't have Paul if without Stephen. So he was the beginning of everything. And that's why in the very, very first chapter, we are introduced and we get to know more about Stephen. At the time, he was about 25 years old. Emmanuel describes to us he hadn't taken the name Stephen yet. He was born and called Jeziel, and we recommend you to read the book. We're not going to be able to get into the details why later on he, quote unquote, changed his name and he was then called Stephen. But he's there at his home with his father, Jochebed, and his sister, Abigail. And Abigail is younger, a few years younger than Stephen, about 8 years old. And at this time, as we get to know more about Abigail and Stephen's life, their mother had already passed away. So she was not there physically, right? But the teachings, the base of the knowledge that she provide to her children, you will see, will impact their imprinted in their spirit for so much, as such a strong imprint in their spirits that they carry it throughout their lives. And it's interesting to see how that different from his dad, even though his dad is someone that was also study a lot at the Mosaic laws. They didn't know about Jesus at the time. This was about year 33, 34. So they didn't really had the knowledge of Jesus' teachings yet, but as Paloma explained to us, they had this Christ conscious. They was raised through the Mosaic laws, and even though his dad was aware, he was not an evil person. We will see he still had this pride inside of him. So at this part in the story, the dad comes home. He had just been in the center of the city. And at the time, during the Roman Empire, were not very different from what we see nowadays, but even more permanent, more stronger, where violence was was unfortunately part of the culture, and especially between different classes, races. And his dad was walking, going to the market where he saw some Roman soldiers standing around and being very respectful. He put his head down and he continued on his way. But the soldiers took that as an insult. They took it personally in abusing of their power. They then mistreated him. And of course, as you can see here in this beautiful image by Projeto Imagem, that they then go and are very violent with his dad. And not enough, when he was coming back, then he also encountered other Roman soldiers on the way. And this time he was like, okay, I learned my lesson. I'm gonna acknowledge it, and I'm gonna say hi. And they took in the opposite direction. And they say, who are you to be speaking with us? So he comes home, and you will hear, I'm going to read some excerpts of this dialogue for us to truly see this understanding of this difference, of this spirit of meekness and peacefulness that Stephen and Abigail had, talking with their father, their loving father. So they're shocked when they see him coming home, looking that way. And, they ask, he explained what happens. And these are Jeziel, Stephen's first words to his dad. And he says, Father, take heart. Our God is just and wise. Let us trust in his protection. Wow. Were you raised to react like this? Were we raised to react in a situation like this? Are we raising our children? Or, as we will see, we would expect indignation, because that's what his father was expecting. He hoped to be perceived at that moment the indignation that seemed to him natural and just, fueled as he was by the desire for revenge. So his father was looking still for that revenge, right? We'll give what we. And Jeziel, very loving, says, but what exactly are you looking for, Father? Are you gonna go to the questor, the Roman kind of public service at the time, Licinius, to really say that you have the rights to go to him and tell about what happened? Don't you remember, Father, what happened last time that we had a similar situation and you went to speak with him? And his father, Joshabab, says, as you know, I have both old and new scores to settle. And in conformance with the edit, tomorrow I shall take advantage of the opportunity the provincial government has given me. And we see in this dialogue between the family, has, even though the mother is still not present, one thing that Jeziel and Abigail learn with their mother is to refer to the scriptures in times of trouble, to look for God in their lives. And knowing that they couldn't be able to put in words to convince their father otherwise, remembering the teachings that they learned with their mother, they say, Jeziel says, Father, I have no right to persuade you otherwise, but let us see what God's word tells us about what you're thinking right now. So another pause for us, as we are going, as Paloma was describing to us, in this troubled times through the pandemic, are we all using this time to reflect with our families? There is much uncertainty, but are we sitting with our family and picking up the gospel to hear God's teachings for us rather than trying to look in social media for answers and others where we know, well, God knows everything. So why not open the gospel and read a message with our family and discuss as a family? And that's exactly what Jeziel did. And this was the message, Proverb 3, verse 11, that they open, which says in the book of Proverbs, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, nor resent his rebuke, for the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father disciplines the son in whom he delights." Joshebab was taken aback by the profound teachings, but it wasn't enough for him to convince him otherwise. So on the next day, he goes and he speaks. He asks to have a session and speak to Licinius. And for his surprise, not only he did not answer and did not hear his request, but he said, "I give you 24 hours to go back and vacate your home and your land because now everything is mine." So he took everything away, everything that he had left, he took it away. And at this very moment, Joshebab, filled with anger and the feeling of revenge, he go walking back home. He see the lands that once were his, that had already been taken by the Roman Empire at the time. And knowing now that the little that he has left, he will be left with nothing. In totally despair, he decides to go and put fire on that beautiful land. And he goes back home. And when he gets home, he looks for Jeziel. He's not there. He waits and waits until very later in the day, his son comes home, as you can see here in the picture, with his clothes. His hands were hurt because he was helping contain the fire on the neighboring lands. And Joshebab, knowing what he did and knowing the kindness in his son's heart, they then, as a family, start talking about what is next for them. And the spirit that Jeziel and Abigail has. And Jeziel says, "Father, don't worry, everything is gonna be okay because God is never short on compassion. The sacred writings teach us that before anything else, He is the zealous Father of our downtrodden of the earth. Such defeats come and go. You have my arms and Abigail's tender care. Why grieve if tomorrow we can leave this house with the divine help and look for another somewhere else in order to devote ourselves to honest work?" And he continues encouraging his father to not be downcast, looking at the bright side, trusting in God as he had learned. And that's when his father disclosed to him the really what he had done, the deeds, and knowing that the Roman soldiers will come soon to get them. He then asks, trusting in God, he asks his sister to then pray and trust in what will come next. And at the end of tonight, we will pass you a beautiful video of the prayer that Abigail recites together with the family. But as we continue in the story, and we're not gonna go into the whole story tonight, but we would just want to illustrate to you that the power that being raised in a family and having one parent. So if you're out there asking yourself, well, but it's me, how about my husband, my wife? They might not be on the same age. In this case, they had one of the parent was that presence, and you will see in this dialogue that Stephen has with Abigail when they are in jail, because she asks, brother, are you angry by what happened? Do you, do you have any grieving for our father for everything that he did? We are here. We were in prison. We don't know what's gonna happen next, knowing about the consequences at the time, knowing that the consequences will be very severe. And Jeziel says, not at all. We are undergoing an experience that must be the most suitable for our redemption. Otherwise, God would not have it send it to us. And Abigail, remembering her mother's words, she says, well, Mom taught us that God's children must always be ready to carry out the divine wishes. The prophets in turn explain to us that men are rods in the field of creation. The Almighty is the Father, and we must be the flowering and fruitful branches of His work. God's word teaches us to be good and kind. The good we must be the flowers and fruits that heaven asks of us. So, in this dear moment, in a lessons for all of us, if we were in that same situation, would we have this resignation as we just heard from Paloma, this meekness to and this trust in God, and the importance of teaching that to our children, because we're seeing here with Jeziel and Abigail, this was fundamental for the most trying times that were going through in their lives. And they continue in this beautiful, beautiful dialogue about not knowing what will happen next, probably knowing that there would be severe consequences for them. And you will read the book, and we recommend you to read and see what happens after this. But the trust that they had in God and knowing that He was taking care of everything. It takes us a few chapters down to the end of the first part of the book, where after going through many different trials, separated for a long time, Abigail, left by herself as a young woman at the time, having to really start her life, worry about her brother in the future. The brother, Jeziel, goes to and is, after suffering through the violence of the soldiers, going through and becoming a slave, but continuing with that spirit of resignation of trust in God and going through the dearest times, on trying times, on a ship, he is then given the quote unquote opportunity to restart anew. He changed his name and he gets to know then the beautiful story, how he gets to know about Jesus. And their father, unfortunately, he perished through the consequences and through the violence that he suffers. But at the very end, after going through much, we see this beautiful scene where, after being persecuted, now Stephen, faithful to Christ and to Christ's teachings, is persecuted by Saul of Tarsus, which you read in the book. What will happen to him is then, after being stoned to death on the arms of his sister, having this beautiful encounter. Then, as he's dying, he goes through this martyrdom on in having still that's peaceful in his spirit, never taking revenge, never reacting, accepting the teachings, trusting that God was guiding his life. He asks his sister, well, I know I'm dying, but with whom I shall leave you now? And his sister is at the time being courted by Saul, his own persecutor. He looks at Saul without hate and he says, may God bless you both. You, beloved, is not my enemy, but a brother. So must be a good and generous. He defended Moses to the end. When he meets Jesus, he will serve him with the same zeal, be a loving and faithful companion to him. So that friend is an example of exactly what Paloma described to us, that is in the gospel according to Spiritism, this spirit of meekness and peacefulness, where even going through the hardest trials, at the very end, Stephen then discarnates, looking at his persecutor in the eye with loving and kindness, knowing that the moment that he learned more about Jesus, he will defend that with all his strength, even though Saul at the time was not even considering the fact of really getting to know more about Christ and Christ conscious. So, a beautiful book, a beautiful and example story for all of us. And this is just a teaser for you to read more and study more. But most of all, friends, tonight for us is this example of being raised in a family where the mother, in this case, was someone that really make the effort to not only raise her children with love and care, but teach them God, that God is the base of everything, is our foundation, and that even going through the hardest times, if we trust in God, we'll be able to and have the strength to go through what we have to go through.
Thank you, Daisy. So, friends, to raise a peaceful child, we need to practice ourselves first. We need to practice it. As we've learned today with the Spiritist teachings, to be peaceful is about putting God center stage. With God, we can be at peace because God is taking care of everything. If we have God and we trust in God, we will certainly see what we cannot do yet, but God can. We will be weak because we don't need to use the spirit of force like Saul of Tarsus did, but the force of the spirit, as Emmanuel says in the book Harvest of Light, and here exemplified by Stephen. Of course, the peaceful heart of all of us is the guiding model Jesus. But in Stephen, we see that it's possible for us to emulate Jesus. And all we need to do is to trust in God. So we're going to wrap up our session with a very unique prayer. A prayer that is based on a psalm. Daisy mentioned as reported in a very experience lived by Abigail and Stephen at a very critical time. Let us then listen to it and make this our most therapeutic moment. The spiritual passes, the prayer, let us feel it and allow the good spirits, who in the name of God are caring for us, to operate upon us.
The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and loving kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the Lord's house forever. Forever.
So, friends, we wish you a beautiful weekend. If you have any question, if you have any particular question regarding parenting, more resources, tips and hints, and even the need for fraternal assistance, please write to us at info@ssvirginia.org, kardecradio@gmail.com. We wish you a blessed evening or day, depending on where you are, and beautiful days ahead, meditating on our power to be peacemakers. Thank you, friends.